Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I'm Zinara Naam Khan on behalf of the Institute of Regional Studies and Pakistan Institute of Conflict and Security Studies. I would like to welcome you all to our seminar today on terrorism and extremism in Pakistan, trends and challenges. We would like to begin with the recitation from the Holy Quran.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد.
The topic that we're going to be, all our esteemed panel is going to be discussing today is terrorism and extremism within Pakistan, because that's such a pertinent issue for us. And it's been, we have faced a wave of terrorism since 2001, mainly due to our participation in the war on terror. And then after the withdrawal of the US-led coalition in Afghanistan, the situation has become even more precarious with the security and all of that. Meanwhile, intolerance stemming from extremism is also apparently rising in the country. Lynching and killing in the name of religion has been defacing Pakistan's otherwise moderate outlook. In this backdrop, Institute of Regional Studies and Pakistan Institute for Conflict and Security Studies is very pleased to have you all here today to listen to our esteemed panelists. And now I would like to request Major General Mohammad Saad Khattak, Chairman PICSS, to come on stage and give his welcome address.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let me take this opportunity to welcome you all to the first joint effort by Institute of Regional Studies and Pakistan Institute for Conflict and Security Studies on a subject on which a lot has been spoken, a lot has been written. I wish that we hear something different today. When we talk of the trends and challenges of this menace, the first thing that comes to the mind of any literate person is the environment we are living in, the environment we are operating in, the environment in which we are surviving. While focusing on the environment, we go through the process of studying the political environment, the socio-economic climate, the widening and the yawning gap between the haves and the have-nots, our judiciary's dispensation of justice mechanism and the issues therein, the ballooning population and the opportunities and challenges therein, and finally, the increasing materialism plaguing our society as we descend down to the lowest pit of morality and human values. Ladies and gentlemen, before coming to this event, I was surfing through Google to get something relevant on the subject. And believe me, what I could find was presenting such a doomsday scenario to me about my country and my people that for a moment I thought it to be a miracle that people like us are still surviving in this country. The point that I want to bring home by saying this is that we are passing through one of the worst periods of intellectual drought of our history. Today, even our people with experience and knowledge are dependent on the selective garbage Google is churning out into the market, and we all believing on what is said. And let me also tell you that most of the people who are sharing such material on the subject that we are talking about are not very friendly to my country and my people. Hence, the biasness of the material that we are studying. Our younger generation today are dependent on this material available to them because our knowledgeable and experienced people have decided to go into hibernation or have got too busy in their lust for minting more and more for their children leaving our younger generation to only Google. So what if the country suffers a daily humiliation as long as by hook or crook I have been able to accumulate enough for my children abroad to lead the luxurious life, though I alone shall answer for my every deed in the 3 by 6 feet of pit or Bangalore that each one of us will be entitled to when the eyes will be closed. When we come down to the brass tacks and start to realistically think about the trends and challenges of terrorism and extremism in Pakistan, we immediately think of the causes and the reasons of this menace. And as I've said, these have been listed umpteen times in lectures, seminars like the one we are sitting, conferences, and of course, many other informal activities. Since 9/11, we launched numerous kinetic operations in the erstwhile FATA and adjoining areas of Pakistan, in which hundreds of thousands of security forces personnel and our civilians have got martyred. We have launched hundreds of intelligence-based operations across the country. The previous government, the PML Nawaz government, if you remember, had launched a comprehensive national action plan to root out terrorism from the country. The US and NATO forces have since left Afghanistan, after which we expected a sigh of relief. Nothing happened. Despite we are nowhere close to overcoming the menace even today. Why? Though we will shortly hear from our worthy speakers in detail, let me briefly share my 2 cents as a student of social sciences. 1, never ever will our condition improve if we as individuals do not reform ourselves before we think of reforming our society. 2, never ever will we attain peace and harmony in our wish list if our wish list, especially those of our leadership, is different than the one for us as well as or for them. And 3rd, never will we ever progress positively if the 1% of us consider it their sole right to lead and rule the country, denying the same opportunities to the 99% of society, reducing them to non-entities and mere cannon fodder. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, never will we ever overcome the challenges of extremism and terrorism till we do not put a stop to our perpetual war with Allah in our every word and deed, both at individual and collective level. The last one is the strategic key to break out of the web weaved around us by those inimical to the unity and prosperity of my country and my people. I thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your welcome address. Now, I would like to move on to our panelists. So I would like to request Mr. Abdullah Khan, Managing Director, Pakistan Institute for Conflict and Security Studies, to give his talk on terror trends in Pakistan since 9/11.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning to everybody. And before I start, I would like to acknowledge that under the leadership of Ambassador Nadeem Riaz, IRS has become one of the most vibrant and active think tank in Islamabad. So sir, all the credit goes to you for making IRS a very attractive place to come. And often I came as a listener. Today I'm here at the stage. My presentation will be based on the statistics which Pakistan Institute for Conflict and Security Studies has been recording for the last 20 years. And since 9/11, everybody knows that there was a wave of terrorism in Pakistan, and Pakistan sided with the United States in its war on terror. And that was the main reason that a blowback effect came in Pakistan, and We have been facing terrorism since then. And without doing much of the analysis, I will leave the analysis up to you. I will present facts. And I have divided this wave into 4 different phases. So please, can I use this? Okay. This is the overall chart of terrorism during last 22 years or 21 years, you can say, up to 31st July 2022. And I think we are, the PICS, Pakistan Institute for Conflict and Security Studies, is able to provide you the latest figures related to terrorist incidents in Pakistan. So this is the latest graph. And we also record the security forces actions, but this is actually only the militant attacks for the last 21 years, since 9/11. So I have divided it into 4 different phases. Back. This is the first phase. From 2001 up to 2006. At that time, we were very, worried about the situation, because the suicide attacks had started in 2002. In February 2002, the first suicide attack of this wave happened in Pakistan. Before that, in Pakistan's history, only 1 suicide attack had happened, and that was against the Egyptian embassy in 1995 in Islamabad. And there was no suicide attack in Pakistan's history other than that. But since 9/11, in the first 4 years, what was the reason? I will explain later, but this is the first phase, and the click. And this is the second phase. It started from 2007 up to 2014. And then there is the third phase in third rectangle, and from 2014 to 2019. And the fourth phase, which we are passing through, and which is, click on please. And this is the fourth phase. So click. The first phase, the militant attacks as terrorist incidents were just going this way, a slight upward trend, and then a steep trend you see right after and we click please, and there is steep decline right after 2015. And then again, click please. Now, once again, there is an upward trend going on in Pakistan. The last, the graph chart, you see, it is for the only 7 months of this year. And first 7 months of this year, 184 2020. So at the end of the year, we may the chart may exceed 2021, because 5 months are left for this year. The main reason, in FATA in 2003-4, we sent our troops for the first time in the history in the FATA. Never before our regular troops were there stationed in FATA, because that was sort of an agreement with the local tribes that Pakistani regular troops will never be stationed there. But at that time, they 'Things happened. Drone Pakistan happened. For local. Because I have just 15 minutes and I cannot explain you the total history of these agreements and each phase, because each phase needs a 1 hour at least lecture. So why the steep upward? The main reason was Operation Red Mosque, Lal Masjid operation happened in Islamabad. And right after that, as per our statistics, if you can, next slide, please. There is perhaps I had mentioned 13 suicide attacks, which was quite a big number, but now we can say only 13 happened from 2002 to 2006. 10 suicide attacks happened in the first 5 months, but the next 5 months, right after Operation Red Mosque, Lal Masjid, 43 militant attacks, suicide attacks happened in the Pakistan. And that was the negative effect of Operation Red Mosque, Lal Masjid. And the militants are still actually using that at a more motivational source to motivate the people to fight against Pakistani security forces. Look, they attacked a mosque, they attacked a madrasa, they killed female children and students and all, blah, blah. This is part of, this is pillar of the major pillar of the narratives of militants, which they built against the Pakistani security forces or Pakistani state. This is the phase you can read. And the TTP was also formed in December 2007. And next phase, please. And from 2007 to 2014, you have seen that Malakand fell to the militants. Most part of the Malakand fell to the militants. Most part of the North Waziristan fell to the militants. A lot of area in the Mohammed Agency, a lot of area in the Khyber Agency, that fell to the militants. So practically major parts of the FATA were governed by the militants at that time. All shades of the militant, Al-Qaeda, ETIM, IMU, and Islamic Jihad Union, and different militant groups, who they were operating from North Waziristan at that time. The North Waziristan had become epicenter of terrorism in Pakistan. And June 2014, IMU militants, along with TTP, they attacked the Karachi airport, if you recall, and many of our aircrafts were destroyed during that operation. And as a result, on 15th of June 2014, Pakistan launched Operation Zarb-e-Azb. And due to that Operation Zarb-e-Azb, we saw a gradual decline and militancy in Pakistan. And in 2014, in August 2014, the TTP split into two. Jamaatul Ahrar, a major chunk of the militants, they separated from the major group TTP and formed their own group. And APS took place, Army Public School attack, in December 2014. Lal Masjid operation was a turning point for Pakistani security forces. Anti-military, anti-security forces sentiments went on highest level due to the Red Mosque operation. And similarly, the APS attack was a turning point for the militants, and their sympathy base shrunk to a large extent due to APS attack in 2014. So that was a turning point. We have seen a drastic decrease in the popular public sport with the militants used to enjoy in the Pashtun belt of the Pakistan. And then 2015, we had launched Operation National Action Plan. And contrary to the many claims where the people say that nothing happened as per National Action Plan, I can debate based on the facts. A lot of progress were made against each point of National Action Plan. And perhaps FATA reforms was one of that. FATA merged into the KPK was one of that. And there are all 20 points I cannot discuss in this limited time, but a lot of progress was made under National Action Plan, and I can give some credit to the National Action Plan to bring down the number of militant attacks in Pakistan. ISIS, Khurasan, Walaya Khurasan of Daesh, Dawlat al-Islamiyya, that appeared in 2015 in Pakistan. And when General Qamar Bajwa took over as an army chief, he launched Operation Raddul Fasad, a continuation of Operation Zarb-e-Azb, which was mostly centric on the urban centers of cities of the country, to choke out, you can say, the logistics and the finance and other supportive networks of the militants, and that was successful to a large extent. I have some reservations about the overall success of Operation Raddul Fasad, because that was not as effective as Operation Zarb-e-Azb was. Perhaps the overall concentration was somewhere else. I don't want to go into those details. And then JUA, Jamaatul Ahrar, they split into another group that was Hizbul Ahrar. You know, a lot of militant attacks were attributed to Hizbul Ahrar. And in 2018, Mullah Fazlullah was killed in a drone strike in Afghanistan. And interestingly, we were always opposed to the drone strikes. Perhaps we should be. I don't know why we should be. If we were partner with the United States in war on terror, most of the terror leaders who were striking against Pakistan, they were killed by the United States drone strikes. Whether it was Mullah Haibatullah, whether it was Hakimullah, whether it was Fazlullah, whether it was Sajna, across in Afghanistan and inside Pakistan. And many of Al-Qaeda's top tier leaders, Yahya al-Libi, he was killed by the US drone strike. And he was the main ideologue. The TTP's literature is literally the translation of Arabic literature wrote by the Yahya al-Libi. So, and we must know that Al-Qaeda always, especially after the 9/11, they were the main brain against this militant wave against Pakistan. Today, the Americans have claimed that they eliminated Ayman al-Zawahiri in Kabul in a drone strike. And one of the Twitter IT, he claimed that that drone strike was actually carried out Pakistan with the help of, with the coordination of United States. Who knows what was the reality? Anyhow, and this phase from 2019 and to 2022, we have seen that the TTP was again getting stronger. Reunification of TTP, I've seen not only the reunification happened, but different smaller groups, some splinter groups of Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, they joined TTP, and all the splinter groups, they joined TTP. And 1 month ago, one of the Baloch sectarian militant smaller group from Noshki, they also joined TTP from Baloch ethnicity. So TTP has become a very strong group. But at the same time, it's a very, very strange coincidence. When the TTP was being reunified, at this very same time, the Baloch militants were also unified under the umbrella of BRAS. So the process of, you can say, the strengthening of both types of groups which are targeting Pakistan started in 2018. Very strange. In December 2018, BRAS was formed, Baloch, Rajia, Ajaiya, Sangat Sang, which is initially it was formed by the 4 militant groups, and now this some other militant groups have also joined BRAS, and as well as Sindhu Desh Revolutionary Army (SRA) has joined this in 2022. It has also joined BRAS. So the ethnic militants and the religious militants both were getting strengthened since 2018, and now both are posing serious threat to Pakistan. And ceasefire by TTP, first it was announced in last year in November, on 9th of November. And then they said that the Pakistan has not fulfilled its commitments. And then that they ended that ceasefire, intensified their attacks. Again, in April, mid of April, there were aerial strikes on some TTP and some Hafiz Gul Bahadur groups locations inside Afghanistan. They blamed that Pakistan did it. I don't know whether Pakistan did it or did not, but practically that resulted in the ceasefire, because perhaps it was Pakistan's patience was over and they perhaps was looking for something like that. And as a result, on 29th of May, perhaps at the eve of Eid ul-Fitr, TTP announced an indefinite ceasefire, which is still intact. But the point to worry is, as per Pakistan Institute for Conflict and Security Study PICS data, the trends of militant attacks are still same, but rather than same, they are on the rise. As we released our statistics yesterday to the media, in June 2022, 26 militant attacks happened, and in July, 33 militant attacks happened. So, and interestingly, the rise was not due to the Balochistan, but rise was due to the militant attacks in KPK in FATA. So my conclusion is that even if we strike a deal with TTP, the militant attacks or terror trends will remain there. There are other players like Hafiz Gul Bahadur, although that was a small group, but I don't know from where it is getting strength to carry out big strikes. And a new group, Islamic Musalla Mahaz, something like it has emerged in June, this July. They claim one of the attacks, and there are Baloch militants, and they are also striking big, like, you know, they killed Pakistani Lieutenant Colonel in Ziyarat, and there are other attacks. Since 2018, and I will just wind up because my time is over. Please click. This is the graph of last 1 year based on the PICS militancy database. You can see that last year in July, there were 25 militant attacks, but this year, July, there are 33 militant attacks. So apart from February 22, overall, you see that the slight increase is going on. So that's why I declared it as a fourth phase when the militancy terror attacks are going up. We were expecting that due to American withdrawal, because that was the main reason of this wave of terrorism in Pakistan. We were expecting that there will be peace in Pakistan, but unfortunately, that could not happen. What were the reasons? There can be discussed at length, because but since I fell short of time, so I will wind up my presentation here, and Q&A session, you can ask questions about any further clarification if you want from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abdullah Khan, for such a comprehensive view of terror trends in Pakistan. Now, I would like to request Mr. Malik Habib Noor, Vice Chairman, Movement for Reforms Pakistan, who will come and talk to us about socioeconomic and political causes of terrorism and the challenges and opportunity that comes with talking with TTP. Sir, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wa kafa wa salatu wa salam ala ibadihi allazi istafa amma ba'd. सबसे पहले मैं इस परवकार प्रोग्राम के मुतज़िमीन का तहिया दिल से शुक्रगुजार हूँ कि आप हजरात ने इस मुबारक महफिल में एक अहम मौजू पर बात करने का मौका फराहम किया। शुक्रिया जी। आज जिस मौजू पर हम सब एक जगह जमा हैं, अल्लाह ताला से दुआ है कि वो हमारे सही रहनुमाई फरमाएं। ये मौजू दो शकों पर मुश्तमिल है। नंबर 1, टेररिज्म, जैसे हम अपनी ज़ुबान में दहशतगर्दी कहते हैं। दूसरा, ایکسٹریمزم، ایسے ہم اپنی زبان میں انتہا پسندی کہتے ہیں۔ پہلے ایکسٹریمزم میں انتہا پسندی پر گفتگو کروں گا۔ عربی زبان میں انتہا پسندی کی عربی زبان میں غلو کے الفاظ سے استعمال ہوئی، لہذا قرآن کریم میں اللہ تعالیٰ نے دو جگہ پر، ایک سورۃ النساء آیات نمبر 171 اور سورۃ المائدہ نمبر 77 میں غلو انتہا پسندی سے منع فرمایا ہے۔ چنانچہ ارشادی بری تعالیٰ ہے لا تغلو، غلو مت کرو، یعنی انتہا پسندی سے بچو۔ انتہا پسندی کی تعریف انگریزی زبان میں انتہا پسندی کے لیے ایکسٹریمزم کی اصطلاح استعمال ہوئی ہے، جس کے مختلف لغات یعنی زبانوں میں متعدد معنی بیان کیے گئے ہیں۔ خلاصہ کلام یہ کہ دہشت گردی انتہا پسندی سے ترقی کا نام ہے۔ خواتین حضرات، انتہا پسندی اور دہشت گردی کی تعریف کے بعد اگر ہم گزشتہ 70-75 برس میں رونما ہونے والے واقعات پر ایک نظر ڈالیں، اسلامی جمہوریہ پاکستان 14 اگست 1947 کو کچھ استعماری قوتوں کے مرضی کے برعکس معرض وجود میں آیا اور روز اول سے ہی پاکستان کو کمزور کرنے کی کوشش شروع ہوئی، جس کے نتیجے میں 1948 کو پاکستان پر جنگ مسلط کی گئی اور بھارت نے کشمیر کے 70% علاقوں پر ناجائز قبضہ کر دیا۔ اس وقت بھارت کے مقابلے میں پاکستان معاشی اور دفاعی طور پر کمزور پوزیشن میں تھا، تاہم پاکستان یہ مسئلہ اقوام متحدہ میں لے کر گیا، وہاں ایک قرارداد اکثریت سے منظور ہوئی۔ پاکستان بار بار مطالبے کے باوجود آج تک اس پر عمل نہیں ہونے دیا گیا۔ کس نے عمل نہیں ہونے دیا وہ کسی سے پوشیدہ نہیں ہے۔ اگر یہ قرارداد کسی مسلم ملک کے خلاف پاس ہوتا تو انسانی حقوق کی تنظیموں سے لے کر سب آسمان سر پر اٹھا لیتے۔ اسی طرح مسلم امہ کے لیے انصاف کا حصول ناممکن آ رہا ہے۔ شاید انہی وجوہات کے بنا پر مسلم امہ میں ایک تشویش پائی جاتی ہے اور مسلمہ امہ کے ہر نوجوان نے اس بات کو محسوس کیا ہے۔ معزز خواتین حضرات، پاکستان کے معارضی وجود میں آنے کے ابتدائی سالوں میں رشین بلاک اور امریکن بلاک میں سے ایک بلاک کا انتخاب ضروری تھا، لہذا پاکستان نے امریکن بلاک میں جانے کا فیصلہ کر دیا۔ تب سے لے کر آج تک پاکستان نے بڑے مشکل فیصلے کر ڈالے، جس سے ہمارا ملک دنیا کے بدلی ہوئی حالات میں اپنا مؤثر کردار ادا کیا۔ 1979 میں سرخ انقلاب میں امریکہ نے پاکستان کی مدد سے رشین فیڈریشن کو ٹکڑے کر دیا اور جیسے ہی امریکہ کا ہدف پورا ہوا تو پاکستان کو اکیلا چھوڑ دیا گیا۔ اس پر مختلف پابندیاں لگ گئی۔ افغانستان داخلی خلفشار کا شکار ہوا، جس سے پاکستان پر برا اثر پڑا۔ اس کے بعد 9/11 کا واقعہ ہوا۔ اس واقعے نے پوری دنیا کو الٹ پلٹ کر رکھ دیا۔ ایک دفعہ پھر امریکہ کو پاکستان کو ضرورت عام پڑی۔ اس وقت کے حکمرانوں نے وار اینڈ ٹیرر میں فرنٹ اسٹیٹ کا کردار ادا کیا، حالانکہ پاکستانی عوام نے اس فیصلے کو دل سے قبول نہیں کیا تھا، چونکہ وہ سمجھتے تھے کہ اس جنگ میں سوائے نقصان کے کچھ فائدہ نہیں۔ 20-21 سال کی طویل جنگ کے نتائج پوری دنیا کے سامنے ہیں۔ اس جنگ میں پاکستان کے 80,000 سے زائد لوگ موت کے منہ میں چلے گئے اور $120 ملین سے زائد نقصان ہوا۔ اس جنگ میں پورا پاکستان عموماً اور بالخصوص فاٹا کے علاقوں کو جنگ کی لپیٹ میں آ گیا۔ فاٹا کے عوام نے پاکستان کی خاطر جان و مال کی قربانیاں دی اور آج تک فاٹا کے عوام مشکلات سے دوچار ہیں۔ امریکہ اور اس کے اتحادی ممالک کو چاہیے تھا کہ پاکستان کو یوں اکیلا نہ چھوڑتے، خاص کر فاٹا کے عوام جن کے گھر بار، کاروبار، تعلیم، انفراسٹرکچر تباہ، نہ وہاں سکول، نہ کوئی اسپتال، نہ صاف پانی، نہ بجلی اور دیگر ضروریات زندگی مفلوج ہو چکی تھی۔ کسی نے پیچھے موڑ کے देखा तक नहीं। होना ये चाहिए था कि उनके लिए फंडिंग कर लेते, तो इससे न सिर्फ पाकिस्तान मजबूत होता बल्कि इसके असरात पूरी दुनिया पर होते। पाकिस्तान आर्मी और सिविल इंतजामिया ने महदूद वसाइल में भरपूर कोशिश की, मगर आज भी एक मजबूत चैलेंज अपनी जगह मौजूद है। पाकिस्तान को अंदरूनी और बैरूनी साजिश से मुकाबला करने के लिए मुख्तलिफ मुश्किलात का सामना है। आलमी बरादरी को चाहिए कि वो आगे आएं, पाकिस्तान की मदद करे। इससे पूरी दुनिया में एक मौसर मैसेज जाएगा, क्योंकि ये एक कुली हकीकत है कि बदकिस्मती से फाटा के इलाकों पर ड्रोन हमलों में बहुत सारा नुकसान हो चुका है और पूरी की पूरी खानदान अपनी जिंदगियों से हाथ धो बैठे हैं। और ऐसे ऐसे वाकयात भी मंजराम पर आ चुके हैं कि किसी घर पर ड्रोन हमला हुआ, इसके नतीजे में घर के 1-2 बच्चों के अलावा सब मर चुके हैं और वो आज 18 और 19 साल की उम्र तक पहुंचे हैं। तो जाहिर बात है कि उनके दिल में इंतकाम का जज्बा होना लाजमी अमर है। लिहाजा हुकूमत को चाहिए कि फाटा में तालीमी इमरजेंसी लगाएं, वहां टेक्निकल और मयारी तालीमी इदारे कायम करें, बेरोजगार नौजवानों को रोजगार दें और वहां पर रोजगार के मौके पैदा करने के लिए कारखाने बनाएं। और इंशाअल्लाह वो दिन दूर नहीं कि हमारा मुल्क बहुत जल्द अमन का गवारा बनेगा। फाटा में सियाही मकामात है बहुत ज्यादा है और वहां पर सियाहती मराकज कायम करें। फाटा में मदनियात के वाफिर मकदार में ज़खायर मौजूद है, हुकूमत को चाहिए कि इससे इस्तेफादा हासिल करें। मोहतरम ख़वातीन हज़रात, आखिर में अर्ज करना चाहता हूं कि हमने 2 बातों पर गौर करना है। नंबर 1 कि माशरे में इंतहा पसंदी की वजूहात किया है, इस पर संजीदगी से गौर करना होगा और इस बात पर भी गौर करना है कि इसका हल क्या है। तो जान लीजिए कि हर मुश्किल मसले का हल कोई ना कोई हल जरूर होता है। लिहाजा जो अनासिर इंतहा पसंदी या दहशतगर्दी में मुलविस हैं, उन्हें राह रास्त पर लाने के लिए क्या तजवीज़ किया जाए। फार्मूला नंबर 1 कि उनको मारा पीटा जाए या उनको कुचला जाए। फार्मूला नंबर 2 कि उनके साथ मुज़ाकरात किया जाए। पहला फार्मूला तो इस्तेमाल किया गया है। 40 ममालिक अमरीकी इत्तेहाद अमरीका की सरपरस्ती में 20 साल से ज्यादा अरसा अफगानिस्तान में तालिबान से लड़ते रहे, मगर यह फार्मूला कारगर साबित ना हुआ। आखिरकार उन्होंने फार्मूला 2 में इस्तेमाल किया, उनके साथ मुज़ाकरात किए और वो अमरीका समेत तमाम इत्तेहादी अफगानिस्तान से निकल गए। लेकिन अब जरूरी इस बात की है कि उनके साथ मदद की जाए, उनको महरूमियों का इजाला किया जाए, उन्हें माशरे में मुसावी मुकाम दिया जाए, कहीं फिर पहले की तरह हालात पैदा ना हो, उन्हें अपने करीब किया जाए, उन्हें माशरे में मुसावी मुकाम दिया जाए। इन जैसे मसाइल का हल जंग नहीं। अब सबको याद होगा कि वियतनाम में जंग के नतायज सामने आए थे, अमेरिकन अपनी फोर्स बमुश्किल निकालने में कामयाब हुई थी। लिहाजा हर मुश्किल का बेहतरीन हल मुज़ाकरात है, न कि जंग। अगर हम 2006 की तरह पीछे मोड़ के देखें, इस वक्त के केपी की गवर्नर लेफ्टिनेंट जनरल अली मोहम्मद जानवर अगजई, उन्होंने वजीरिस्तान में इंतहापसंदी गुरों से मुज़ाकरात करने की कोशिश की थी, मगर बदकिस्मती से अंदरूनी क्या बैरूनी दुनिया भी इस वक्त को अच्छी निगाह से नहीं देखा गया। अगर इस वक्त फार्मूला नंबर 2 पर अमल किया जाता तो हालात जल्द नॉर्मल होने के इम्कानात बहुत ज्यादा और मजबूत थे। अब पहली बात के माशरे में इंतहा पसंदी और इसकी तरफ जाने की असबाब किया है। इंतहा पसंदी के असबाब है गुर्बत। गुर्बत को, दहशतगर्दी को सबसे अहम वजह करार दिया गया है। पाकिस्तान के 60% आबादी खत गुर्बत से नीचे जिंदगी गुजार रही है और खसूसन फाटा के अवाम के हर किस्म सहूलियात से महरूम है। बहुत से गरीब वालिदैन अपने बच्चों को खाना खिलाने और तालीम देने से कासिर हैं और वो एहसास कमतरी में मुब्तला हैं। नतीजा ये बरामद होता है कि गरीब खानदानों के नौजवान भी अपनी जिंदगी बेहतर बनाने के लिए बराह रास्त अस्करियत पसंद ग्रुपों में शामिल हो जाते हैं। गुर्बत दहशतगर्द तंजीमों के लिए अफरादी कुव्वत का काफी सप्लाई लाइन फराहम का सबब बनती है। दूसरा है बेरोजगारी। बेरोजगारी शोर्स का एक जरिया है, क्योंकि ये बेरोजगार लोगों में शिकायत पैदा करती है कि वो लोग एहसास कमतरी में मुब्तला हो जाते हैं। फाटा में रोजगार के मौके बिल्कुल नपीद हैं। نوجوانوں کو روزگار دیا جائے, انہیں پولیس آرمی میں بھرتی کیے جائیں. حکومت کو چاہیے کہ وہ نوجوانوں کو روزگار فراہم کرنے کے لیے ہر ممکن اقدام کریں. تیسرا ہے احساس کمتری. پہلی وجوہات میں بتایا گیا کہ غربت اور بے روزگاری سے عوام میں احساس کمتری آ جاتی ہے. جب وہ اپنا اور بندوبست علاقوں کے حال کا موازنہ کرتے ہیں تو انہیں یہ احساس ہوتا ہے کہ گو یہ اس ملک کے شہری ہی نہیں. فاٹا میں آپریشن کے بعد اس کے بعد حال ہی کا یہ عالم ہے کہ وہاں سکول نہیں, علاج کے لیے معقول انتظام نہیں, انفراسٹرکچر تباہ ہو چکا ہے, پینے کے لیے صاف پانی میسر نہیں, سر چھپانے کے لیے مکان نہیں, مکان کیا گاؤں کے گاؤں تباہ و برباد ہوندے پڑے ہیں, ان کا تجارت تباہ و برباد ہو گیا ہے. لہٰذا اس کا بندوبست کیا جائے تاکہ ان کی احساسی کمتری ختم ہو اور وہ یہ سمجھے کہ ہم بھی اس معاشرے کے افراد ہیں. حکومت کو درست سمت میں اہم اقدامات کرنے کی ضرورت ہے تاکہ انتہا پسندی اور دہشت گردی کے پرامن خاتمہ کیا جا سکے. معزز خواتین حضرات, آج اگر ہماری حکومت ان کی طرف امن, دوستی اور بھائی چارگی کا ہاتھ بڑھائیں, اس سے معاشی استحکام دیں, دوسری بنیادی ضروریات پوری کریں, تو ایسے دوسری شہریوں کی طرح اول درجے کا شہری سمجھیں, تو میں گارنٹی کے ساتھ کہتا ہوں کہ فاٹا کا نوجوان اس ملک کا سب سے زیادہ وفادار انسان بن کر نکلے گا اور وطن عزیز کی حفاظت کے لیے جان کی بازی لگائے گا. ہم اپنی حکومت سے معاشی خوشحالی, تعلیم اور روزگار کا مطالبہ کرتے ہیں کہ اگر حکومت نیک نیت سے یہ اقدام اٹھائیں جائیں تو فاٹا میں دہشت گردی کا سوال ہی پیدا نہیں ہوگا, کیونکہ ہم صدیوں سے باہمی اعتماد میں ایک زبان عمرانی معاہدے کی شکل میں رہتے ہوئے ہیں. ہمارے اپنے قوانین ہیں جس کے حکم عدولی پر سماجی بائیکاٹ اور سخت سزائیں مقرر ہیں. ہم اپنے لوگوں کو امن پسند فطرت معلوم ہے. یہ لوگ خوددار ہیں, غدار نہیں. یہ لوگ غریب ہیں, بیکاری نہیں. انہیں امن کی ضرورت ہے. یہ صدیوں سے پس رہے ہیں, جنگوں میں بہت خون بہہ چکا ہے. انہیں امن چاہیے, انہیں جینے کا حق دیا جائے تو یہ سب پرامن شہری بن کر رہیں گے. آخر میں اللہ تعالیٰ سے دعا گو ہوں کہ وہ ہمارے ملک کا حامی اور ناصر رہے. شکریہ. پاکستان زندہ باد.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malik Habib Noor. Now we'll be moving on to our next panelist, Mr. Ehsan Ghani, who is the former head of the National Counter-terrorism Authority of Pakistan. He will be discussing role of governance in combating terrorism.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, IRS and PICS, for the invitation and the opportunity to learn from everyone present in the hall. I've always maintained that to resolve an issue, we must first acknowledge and understand the issue. So let me start with the vital and difficult part, the elusive understanding of extremism and terrorism. Legal and policy framework that fails to clearly define the phenomena it seeks to address not only risks leading to inefficient measures, but also can backfire. Vague concepts, interpretations such as intolerance, violent extremism, radicalization are open to different angles and different interpretation and can easily be abused. In particular, they risk encompassing manifestation of national and international human rights laws. It opens gateways to abuse of anti-terrorism laws. As we have experienced in Pakistan, ATA 1997 is one of the most abused piece of legislation that we have. So my understanding, not definition, understanding of extremism is absolute belief in one's truth, entrenched sense of self-righteousness, and a judgmental attitude towards other people's belief, followed by intolerance. What I'm saying is right. What I'm doing is right. What you're doing is wrong. What you're saying is wrong. And if you don't subscribe to what I'm saying and doing, I will exclude you from what I'm doing. So then the issue and the polarization that society suffers, us and them. Then there is dismissive mindset exhibited through violence. Extremism can be social, political, ethnic, liberal, conservative, religious, left, right, sectarian, everything. There's a pathway from intolerance to terrorism. And going by an example, let's see, all of us are sitting here on the ground floor, and all of us are satisfied with what we have. But me and the ambassador are not satisfied here. We were in service, good pay, car, driver, other things, and then we retired. And the pay was cut to half or less than half into pension. The car was gone, the driver was gone. And we sat down and we said, what the hell? This is not justice, we are being wronged. And we move up to the first floor. On the first floor, the state comes to us and says, oh, khazana khali hai, there is nothing in the kitty, and you people have to kind of stay with us. Don't be angry. And offers the ambassador a slot in IRS. So he goes back to the first floor. I don't, I'm still not satisfied. So I go up to the second floor. There, my situation is not improved, and I look for targets to blame. It's the military doing, it's the DMG, it's the Foreign Office. Politicians are doing this to me. So I start blaming people or segments. And there are people who are looking for people like me, organizations looking for people like me, and they give me this moral engagement or justification for my anger and for my frustration. You're right. Look, if the kitty was empty, where are all the cavalcades coming and all the spending and the 52-member cabinet? They can pay you, but they're not paying you. So the us versus them comes into my mind and my thinking. And I'm separated from my family, from my friends, and put under strict security. This is where they take me to the fifth and the final floor. I do violence here. I have no inhibitions, killing people. This is how I travel from one path, from one floor to another floor. And this may not be if on the first floor, the state, instead of giving me some justification and prevail upon me, I could go back. And if their actions to my dissatisfaction are disproportionate, I could go to the fifth floor directly. So it is not that everyone has to do that. In my opinion, all conflicts are either political, social, or economic. The state's response determines the pathways. Drivers of violent extremism are numerous. They are one and they're not two. There are two, we divide them, not we, but the academia, that's how we're sitting here. They divide these into two primary, the push factors and the pull factors. The push factors are built structurally within the society. The pull factors are individual motivations, environment is brought up. But if we have to kind of club them together, as was mentioned, lack of socio-economic opportunities, marginalization, discrimination, governance, violation of human rights, rule of law, prolonged and unresolved conflicts, Kashmir, Palestine, and radicalization in prisons. There is, though, one common denominator, and that is vulnerability, जिसको हम उर्दू में बेबसी, helplessness. If you look at all of them, whether it is individual vulnerability, whether it is group, ethnic, sectarian, religious, that, in my opinion, is the common denominator. So when we know all these things, and as was mentioned, there's so much literature available everywhere, and there are good and bad examples. And extremism, intolerance is not new to the subcontinent or the South Asia or the globe as a whole. So why have we not been able to curtail or at least prevent, counter extremism and terrorism? So if I was to place the blame, apart from myself, our policies, our policy formulation, our policy implementation, our feedback on the policies, the course corrections are missing. So that is the first. We make policies mostly in isolation. Though I have seen a change in the last few years, that there's more and more consultation in policy formulation process. But generally, we make policies in isolation, quoting NISP 1, the National Internal Security Policy, 1418, was formulated by 4 people without any consultation with anyone. NISP 2, however, there was a consultative process. The NACTA's National Counter-Extremism Policy Guidelines, we had 32 consultative sessions with over 300 national and international scholars, academia, experts. And the second is political instability. If you look at the last, say, 3 governments, 2008 to 13, it was a battle for survival for the PPP government. And they didn't have any time to spend on CT, CVE efforts. The second one, 13 to 18, again, for a brief period of peace, there was political instability, had no time to spend on CT, CVE. And the third one, 18 to now, again, right from the start, didn't have any time for CT, CVE. So if you look at the spectrum of policies, CT, CVE policies, NACTA, 2008 to 13, they didn't know where to place it, the Prime Minister or the Interior Secretary. 14 to 18, again, the act passed in 13 was not adhered to by the next government. And now, if you look at NISP 2, that is 1823, was passed on the last day of PMLN government in the last cabinet meeting. So the next government came in and didn't even open it. Same with NSP, National Security Policy. A lot of consultation was done. IRS was involved. We were all part of that. It came out with a lot of fanfare and has been buried where it is. In my opinion, a reason for absence of collective national effort to face challenges to Pakistan is that those who can make a difference, are preoccupied with their own personal or institutional battle for survival or supremacy. My talk is divided in two parts. So this was one, and the second is, can rule of law, governance, and justice mitigate impacts of terrorism and extremism? So I come to the second part, and disagreeing to what my learned co-panelist said, that poverty and unemployment are the basic reasons for terrorism. A UNDP study reveals that people do not take up guns because they're poor. People do not take up guns because they're poor, but because they're angry and frustrated. And we've seen, as I explained, people who are angry. Look at the richest terrorist, and we can't blame the Madaris or one particular segment. The National Counter-terrorism Policy Guidelines that NACTA prepared in 2017 identified 6 problems and 6 solutions, possible solutions. The first one was absence of rule of law and poor service delivery. Absence of rule of law and poor service delivery. What happens? These things create vacuums for the non-state actors to come in and fill the gap that the government or the state actors leave and do not do their jobs. The second problem was detached communities. Communities, the citizen feels that the state is not bothered about him or his plight, especially the youth. There is feeling of rejection leading to mistrust between the two. The third was dysfunctional contemporary and religious education system. The moment there is a terrorist attack, Madaris. As if our contemporary education system is ideal. Second, Madaris are not synonymous with Islam. And they were Madaris pre-9/11 also. So both our religious and contemporary education system has become dysfunctional. And it's the most neglected sector. The fourth is hostile and reactive media. Ratings are more important than national interest. And our media, especially now with the social media, spitting venom 24/7. It affects the younger generation. Our icons, whether they're political icons, they start spitting venom on the TV, starting 7, ending at midnight. There have hardly been any initiative for rehabilitation, reintegration, and renunciation. There have been some efforts, but far and few. And the last, absence of a value system. Loss of self-esteem. We are not bothered what everyone is thinking about us. And we have a decaying culture. One of the basic hurdle to extremism was our culture, any country's culture. Those of you who remember the fanfares, melee, those in the villages, where everyone would go. The Shia would go, the Sunni would go, the Christian would go, the Hindu would go, the PPP would go, everyone would go there. So we were all together. That has gone. If we come to governance, whether it is bad or good governance, and writ of the state has to be ruthlessly ethical about what it is doing. And I'll explain that. What happens? Lack of governance and writ of the state, as I've mentioned, give rise to the violent non-state actors. And there is a shift of power. And let me say, as it happened, especially in FATA and KP, from Hujra to the mosque. And this is nothing new. Nothing new to our area and nothing new to Islam. Medieval Christianity. From king to pope, and pope back to the king or the legislative. If we just look at one segment, there has been a shift in terror financing. At the start of, say, the Afghan Jihad, the proscribed organization that came up, sprung up as a result of that, and earlier were almost penniless. And now when you look at them, look at the last dharna, TLPs, from soup to fried fish to eggs to everything. So the money has shifted from the secular mafias to the religious mafias. And those of you who have had any interactions, even the law enforcement agencies seek their help to resolve issues. कब्जा कराना हो तो पुलिस से बेहतर है कि जो मकामी प्रोस्क्राइब्ड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है उनके पास चले जाएं. Human rights violation and rule of law violations are push factors, both by the state actors and the non-state actors. There's a very thin line between human rights and rule of law and security. Where do you cross the line from security to human rights violation? It's a double jeopardy. There is a terrorist attack in an area. So what happens? People in that area die in that attack. And then security forces ने इलाके को काबू को घेरे में ले लिया और घर-घर तलाशी शुरू. There are dead and injured people in the houses, and police and the law enforcement agencies go and search. So it's a double jeopardy, and that results in delinking the citizen from the state. Violent extremism thrives in an environment characterized by lack of governance, democracy deficit, corruption, and a culture of impunity for unlawful behavior of the state actors. Poor governance, when that is combined with repressive policies, as was the case in FATA and is the case in Baluchistan, government actions as push factors. 71% of people who have been involved in terrorist activities or extremist militancy, then 71% pointed to government actions. Killing of a family member, killing of a friend, arrest of a family member or a friend. State security actors' conduct revealed as a prominent accelerator of recruitment. Development disparities are pointed out by my friend here. They fuel citizen mistrust and frustration. Elite capture. Again, as long as political elite, rich, military and civil bureaucracy can do as they please without fearing any kind of legal actions or sanctions, society will continue to get more and more polarized. Law enforcement as a push factor. Insensitive policing and profiling in public location, at security checkpoints, checking people with beards and letting others go creates frustration. Checking people with a shawl, the way we dress in KP, Fata, Balochistan. In my opinion, improved policy formulation, consultation with stakeholders, both positive as well as negative stakeholders, and its implementation. It is said that Pakistan is the most legislated country in the world. There's no implementation. There is need for urgent rethinking of state security-focused interventions, which we call as the kinetic measures, or I term them as tactical CT versus strategic CT. Tactical CT is law enforcement, military actions. Strategic CT is soft interventions, which are the domain of political leadership. Due to our political instability, those have also been outsourced to the military establishment. Not their domain. They have done what they were tasked to do. And as the graph was shown, when terrorism was coming down, our soft interventions should have gone up. We didn't. The national internal security policy had both soft interventions, hard interventions. NAP has both. NISP 2 has both. National Counter-terrorism policy guidelines, both. Mostly soft intervention. None of them were touched. Need for emphasis on certainty of law. Whether you break a traffic light or you carry out a terrorist act, 100 rupees fine should be certain. And those of you who have read Paulo Coelho, The Devil and Miss Prime, and he says, it isn't the desire to abide by the law. It isn't the desire to abide by the law that makes everyone behaves as society requires, but the fear of punishment. Every one of us carries a gallows inside us. Thank you very much. Anything I'll respond to in the next session.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ahsan Ghani, for your comprehensive talk. Now, I would like to request our final speaker, Air Chief Marshal retired Suhail Aman, who is the former Air Chief of the Pakistan Air Force, who will be talking about Pakistan's counter-terrorism policies and their impact on reducing terrorism in Pakistan.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, good morning. Thank you for the three presentations that I had, they're preceding me, and they put out very clearly what happened, really. And my effort would be to look at from a window, and today when I stand here, I very clearly see a window of the past, about 20 years. Our generation saw that happen. The Army Public School event, which was talked about, and then 18 years struggle that the nation went through. And now the effort is that put out the lessons from here and see where do we go in future. That's a single liner. And that's what I will attempt to do. Ladies and gentlemen, while we talk about so many other factors here, let me start with the big optimism. And that optimism is that where we stand today, I think, worthy investor, I congratulate you to hold such a dialogue here, because we stand at a place where we saw the spike Abdullah showed, and of course, then there you see this rise coming up. So that's a critical time here to assess, and we don't go where we were. And the optimism that I want to speak about here is the complete national resolve against all the odds. Let that be very clear. What happened to us during that time was not the Red Mosque, was the government decision to go ahead and side with the West to support in Afghanistan, full stop. And rest was a follow through. Now, if that be the case, the kind of war that we fought, and I say this very clearly, for anybody to think that they were nomads, ya dehati the jo ladne ke liye aage, no. They were the best trained guerrillas that could have been put into the soil of Pakistan. I've fought them. I've seen them with my own eyes. I've seen the tactics. I've seen the kind of weapon caches into the mountains. It doesn't come by the nomads. It doesn't come by the villagers. Now, that was a big effort which came in. And I honestly want to salute the nation of Pakistan, and I'm by no means emotional about it. I seriously mean it. Let alone the armed forces. But then every individual went through this huge trauma. And we're not here to say who sided with us and who left us at the wrong times. At the end of the day, आप अपनी किस्मत को खुद संवारते हैं. आप समझते हैं कि आपको क्या करना है. But then we sided with something, the nation fought. I think very correctly pointed out by Noor that 80,000 soldiers, 80,000 people of Pakistan, 7,000 soldiers, and about 20,000 lost their limbs, and $120 billion for a country like us is not a joke. ये numbers नहीं है जो जहन से गुजर जाएं कि 7,000 soldiers शहीद हो गए. No, 7,000 is a very big number. We never lost that kind of number into our wars. And that was such a protected time. And the kind of mental trauma that the nation went through. So we succeeded. And I say that very clearly. Yes, 136 children, I salute each one of them. There's people, and we were there at that time fighting that war, turned around our minds and said, that's it. And that wasn't a decision to support the West in the Afghanistan. And then the TTP was eliminated. The point here is that when you look at the policy level, I'll just try and reconnect with Joe Nye, who's an American, who was a founder of the hard power and soft power issue. And he, of course, wrote books on it. Yeah, perfectly all right. But then, of course, by 2008, he started to realize that that's not what it is. And I think Ehsan Sahab also talked about it. And I just want to take it a little further. It's not about use of the hard power. It's not about the use of the soft power. It is the use of smart power. आप किस वक्त क्या apply करते हैं? And please remember, A dialogue from the position of weakness is not a dialogue. End of the day, it has to be. And I'm being a soldier, believe you me, I'm the last man who would think that we apply power and we apply force. No. There are multiple factors, and we need to look at those factors and address them. We as a nation were very fortunate. And when Abdullah showed this slide, when you came down to 2015, the lowest ebb, we were the most fortunate nation at that time. We had defeated terrorism. That was a launching pad for us to realize that ye to khatam ho gaya, we need to move forward. What I've studied in life and what is recognized, the three pillars. I think if we take these three pillars, this is my learning of life. It's security, stability, and prosperity. If you're not secure, you can't be stable and you can't bring prosperity to the people. I'll give you some beautiful example about the security. Africa. You go to the DRC Congo, and these two countries that I went to, and I opted to go to these two countries. DRC Congo, disaster. I mean, there's no political setup. There's no stability. And, we went out to a village and we spoke to the governors, and he said, everybody in my village has been plundered. Soldiers do not have a grain to eat. And girls from 8 to the women to 80 all have been raped. But this is DRC Congo. And I saw the world's the most beautiful pineapples lying on the floor. They can't get to 30 miles away to a harbor to export it out and bring prosperity to people because you do not have security in that country. We moved on to Ghana. Ghana is lovely. And I said that in a seminar, there are a few people who took it absolutely wrong. Democracy is not a one-fit-all solution for everybody. And I'll give you an example. Ghana is peaceful. They don't have a typical democracy. We went out to the government, we stayed with them, and I'm picking up the three pillars. And believe you me, when I make an effort to put them into the extremism and the terrorism matrix, you see how important it is for our policymakers now and our political leaders and all leaders, as a matter of fact, to realize that this is a very good opportunity, isko miss mat karen. We picked up the bodies with our own hands. We've been into the mountainous terrain to find out the huge weapon caches which came from where? Was it the nomads who were doing it? And there were external forces of pushing that to our country. I mean, it's a no-brainer. We all know who was doing it. And on top of it, we were to be blamed that we're playing double games. No, we stood tall at that time and said, no, if we are fighting for our country and our security, we will do that. Coming back to Ghana. The government pushes the money out to the chieftains, and we visited the chieftains. That's not democracy, but they're responsible to bring stability to their own region. Perfectly all right. I mean, the way I run my home, if it runs well, you may not follow that formula, and that's perfectly all right. Because if you decide you want to run your house in that manner, yeah, you may and you should. But then, hame democracy ka ek wo, I'm not against democracy. What I'm saying is that I've given you two very clear examples. Democracy is not a one-fit-all solution for everybody. You want your country to be secure, you decide the form of government that you have. So I hope ये बड़ा बारीक सा difference है जो हमें समझना है. You may still go ahead and have a parliamentary system, and you may still do that. But then the tribal belt has its own culture. You have to respect the way they govern things. I remember we are into these times. I'm sorry, there are stories which will come up, but then stories leave a lot of 4 young Norwegian girls storming in a land cruiser into Afghanistan, and they're stopped by some friends and say, "How you here? We come here to teach women liberation to the Afghan women." I said, hold on, do you know Afghan language? Sorry. Do you know Afghan the culture? No, but we're here from such and such NGO. That is where we went wrong. Don't get into somebody's house to start correcting things. We did that. You see that long, huge battle? 40 countries trying to put that. And it's not a question of defeat and a victory at all. We've seen this with our own eyes, and we're very into negotiating. We're trying to facilitate. We're trying to make sure that the stability begins. It's important for us to learn, let people live the lives that they want to live. The only thing is the government brings them provisions, the government brings them employment and gives them, like Ahsan Bhai said, give them that environment and let people carry on with the whole thing. Believe you me, a complex nahi. It's not complex at all. And I'm not saying it because I'm a very optimist man. I see this happening very clearly through that window that I'm talking about, stability. Now I'm picking up the second pillar here. When you reach the security, and I'm not talking of 2015, believe you me, when there are terrorist blasts going on in the country and there are 100 people killed every day, we all seen it. You might have seen it as youngsters, but we, the elderly people here, have seen it. Who bothers about single national curriculum when the people who are dying? Who bothers about the economic policy, and who bothers about this? Aap firefighting mein lag jate hain. We as a nation should realize ye window dobara nahi milegi. We don't have to let that thing come back again. I mean, you can't have another 120 billion loss. We're not supposed to be taking sides. If this guy, Ayman, has been killed in Afghanistan, that's their business. And you know, the social media is something, sovereignty that we talk about. Sovereignty is absolutely changed its meaning, starting from the territorial sovereignty that you're there to the economic sovereignty. And of course, the narrative sovereignty is something that I'm sure I'm not an intellectual at all, but the people who must be talking of this concept, there is a narrative building. Look, the narrative is so simple. These jihadis, Pakistan is a country taken on the Islamic name. You didn't put the Sharia in, and that's why we are there. What about the border? How could you put that during it? आपने ठेका लिया हुआ है उस काम करने का? And don't you know that the Constitution of Pakistan is a Bible for a country, and that clearly manifests the role of Islam here. 1903, Britain allowed the women to vote. What are we talking about in terms of? I mean, we haven't done well, but then a lot of other countries which haven't done well. So I think we need to look at those things with that respect. So stability leke aaye, or political stability and economic stability are something the most critical and most important. Please remember, आपकी economic stability नहीं है. नूर भाई ने भी बात की कि फाटा में बहुत नुकसान. I am a eyewitness to what happened in Fata and those areas. But the lives that your people had at that time, what to talk of freedom? I mean, they were all subjugated. They were killed. Their women had to stay at home. The children couldn't go to school, and all this happened. But economic sovereignty, अगर हमारे मुल्क के पास आएगी, economic leverage आएगा, and politically mindset सही होगा, then you do. And let me also assure you, enough has not been done. And I totally believe that enough has not been done into Balochistan and other rural areas. And everything just cannot be done with a government like ours. But then there have been massive effort. And I think usme whole nation has participated. The government, I remember huge number of schools and the medical centers which have been opened in Fata and also in Balochistan. But the kind of population, 220 million people is not maybe 229 now, is not a small number, which has to be managed. So I think we really need to understand that this security window has to be used. We have to put the stability factor in, and when you become stable today, anaon ko bhool jaएं, leave that on one side for some time. When my house is on fire, I don't bother about what dress am I wearing or which car do I need to sit into. Then it is my house which is important. So घर को बचाएं और घर को समझे कि क्या है. And believe you me, we're very friendly nation, and we've interacted with our friendly countries from the West and talked about the policies and everything. And Pakistan went a mile ahead. But my firm belief, ladies and gentlemen, here is that you are responsible for your own house. And if you're determined, you make your way through and you put your foot down. But this has to be done, and the drone attacks will not happen in your country. And I wish that there was a graph shown here on that also. But then again, in the worst of the times, the number of drone attacks was the minimal. And that was all very well controlled to see that nothing really moves out of the graph curve. And we are always aware that what goes on, because this is your country. Yes, logistic support and all those things are a factor which can be given to a friendly country. But then you decide what is to be done to your own country. And I think taking that charge in your hand, and that can happen only and only if you're secure, which to my mind, with that bit of graph going up, is not a bad situation at this time. But there are indicators. So जो कहा गया है ना कि बड़ी हम dangerous situation में आ गए हैं, या हम बहुत precarious हालात के अंदर. No, that's not happened right now, but it's going to happen if we don't wake up. If we don't govern properly, then what will happen is that the others will have opportunities. Do you think that Indians would love to enjoy this? The concept of warfare has, we all know, has changed absolutely. The wars are fought here now and the social media. And this Ahmed Zawahiri thing, you know, somebody puts it out there. No, it's not him, but him involved. So social media pe dabao jo hai na, wo aapka charge hona shuru hota hai. There's so much of misinformation. I am not privy to a study, but to my mind, social media carries more than 80% of false news, perception building, and the narrative building. And that narrative building is done by your enemies. We have to learn to mature up to that level where we take care of those areas, we take care of those things. The last strand that is very closely linked up to after you become secure, you bring stability, and then, of course, is the prosperity. The prosperity, to my mind, comes because is prosperity say you need to look after your rural areas, you need to give employment, you need to do all this. But for this, the biggest problem that our country has faced ever since is the policy implementation. And I'm not talking of policy formulation. And I think the best example that I saw, I'll give you again a quick story. We are at the Royal College doing the RCDS, and Amnesty International speaker was going to the stage and he was carrying some documents, and I went through and मैंने देखा कि उसके पास जो document था उसपे पाकिस्तान का flag था. And I said, in London, somebody from Amnesty International, what is he doing with the Pakistan flag? Finished lecture, nothing happened. In the question answer session, he said, ladies and gentlemen, this is the country Pakistan, and this is the best anti-corruption document. He's a Harvard teacher. He said, this is the best anti-corruption document that I've seen in my life. Look at the number where Pakistan stands on corruption. And that was a shame. Now, the point that I really want to bring home is that our academia, Ehsan Bhai was right when he was saying that we don't do mutual consultation, and we really, but national security policy was made by a lot of people. You're part of the whole thing. And we're also trying to contribute. But ho gaya na? It does not belong to Mr. X or Y and government Z and government this. No, it does not. Believe me, the documents, the important documents that are signed in the Air Force, and when we made books out of them, they never had anyone's name. They don't belong to us. We're in a service. We are supposed to do our service and move out. So national security policy agar ban gayi hai, to uske upar adhere kare. If there is an economic policy, so as to start implementing those things. And that's the national dilemma that we have, that we possibly do not push in our best. Innovations निकालनी चाहिए, bureaucracy को boldly decisions लेने चाहिए, political level के ऊपर जो है, and these are, believe you me, these are not far-fetched things. There are a lot of societies who have done it. What is Indonesia we're talking about? Look at the prosperity and where the industry has gone. Look at Malaysia, the way they have gone. So you can handle all this. And if you think that this all does not relate to terrorism and the extremist mindset, no, it does. You have to look after your people and they will be fine with you. You'll have to fight the narrative that they build, and you'll have to say that your narrative, you build a national narrative of the way you are, and it will be accepted because you're a nation, you're an institution. So my last point here is that it's a very important moment for us to wake up. It is important to look at the trends, look at the IBOs, look at them very carefully, negotiate from a position of strength, and people should know if you don't behave, we'll fix you in the same. I'm saying my sentences maybe हमारे फौजी तरह के बोलने के हैं, लेकिन fact ये है कि negotiate कर लें, समझा दें. TTP again back there, Afghans have made a promise the soil will not be used. And if the TTP comes here, we'll do worse than what we did to them earlier. But that should be in the back of the mind. Why should FATA suffer because of TTP? ठेकेदार हैं पाकिस्तान के. Why should Balochistan suffer because Indians have their designs out there? In सबके लिए political stability चाहिए, political resolve चाहिए. नारे नहीं चाहिए कि मुझे पाकिस्तान चाहिए और मुझे पाकिस्तान वैसा चाहिए. No, I want to work for this Pakistan. I will put the policy in shape. Last point, honestly speaking, it's not difficult. Resolve हो जाए, सब कुछ ठीक हो जाता है. And I'm sure God will always be on our side if we help ourselves. Thank you so much, Sakal.
Thank you so much, Air Chief Marshal Suhail Aman. Now we'll be moving on to the question and answer session. Please keep the questions short and brief. Please don't comment. And I'll be handing over the floor to Mr. Abdullah Khan to moderate this session.
Thank you. Now raise your hands and I will point. Please go to that gentleman. Your name, your brief introduction, and to whom do your question is addressed, please.
My name is Muhammad Usman Asad. I belong to Youth Parliament Youth Organization, and the panelists. I think it is termed as terrorism. For example, just after the Kabul airport attack by some random extremist, was a drone strike on the home of a NGO worker who was working for an international organization in Kabul. Can we term this attack, this drone strike that killed a normal civilian of Afghanistan, can we call it as a terrorist attack? Similarly, we have seen in the past that some of the Afghan drone strikes, they destroyed normal madrasas. Like, for example, there were some ceremonies where they were enjoying the memorizing of the Quran. There was this ceremony going in Herat, and out of nowhere, there was an attack conducted by the American drone strike. Can we term that as a terrorist strike? This is my question.
Thank you, Sir Suhail.
Okay, perfect. Those are acts of terrorism. And a lot of them, honestly, led to the next generations getting the, what they call as terrorism line. I remember talking to our commandant in London and tell him that you don't have gone through the culture, you kill their father, and 3 generations will go behind you and they'll not spare you. Try and understand this. I have seen the videos and you're absolutely right. When there's a marriage kind of ceremony going on, and not by mistake. And when I say that, I clearly mean it. And those people are removed. Will they child? I mean, when we are doing these kind of discussions, it's important that we speak truth. If you don't speak truth, तो फिर तो कोई फायदा नहीं है ना. So when you eliminate those people, you are seeding hatred, and that does not finish. Even if you build roads there, and even if you build palaces there, it does not finish. So answer to your question is, you have to be good at technology, and I'll correlate it. You have to be good at narrative building, and the leadership has to be good enough to speak the truth and say this what is happening. Believe you me, it doesn't matter you're a small nation or you're a smaller force. So it's important. I fully subscribe. Yes, if it has happened because of a mistake, and I would also like to show you the other side of the whole thing. The counter-terrorism operations, especially from the air, are very complicated. You need to have the right intelligence. And of course, the terrorists merge into the towns, and that's why intelligence is very important. You need to know fourth house in Miradi, that street, this one. It's that complicated. But again, it's not question of a praise, but look at your armed forces. Not even a single instance of collateral damage which has happened. So if you are a good professional and then you have the pain that these are my people, you'll work day in, day out and make sure it does not happen. But if it's a third country and don't care damn about it, no, you better care. So I think I agree with you in principle, but also you need to understand the complexity of the operation also. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Raza Khan and then Madam Shabana Fiaz. Give it to Raza Khan.
Raza Khan, Special Correspondent, PT World, Sarman, good to see you. You were one of the most proactive air chiefs that we have seen, and you were so media savvy that we are honestly missing your days because your two, subsequent air chiefs have not been as media savvy as you were. Excellent presentation by you and Suriname. The only point I want to ask both of you is that, have you seen a more docile and senile state than Pakistan while dealing with terrorism? Somebody starts jumping, as a brother from FATA, about grievances from FATA. Somebody starts jumping about Balawaristan in GB. Somebody starts jumping about Sindhu Desh in Sindh. Somebody starts jumping about Balochistan. And this whole state is watching, and then somebody is blackmailing. In China, they have made progress in our lifetimes. While you joined Air Force, you see where it has reached. There is one power center called the Communist Party of China. When Xi Jinping and the Politburo decides to crush terrorism in Xinjiang, they will do it, and they have done it. This is how nation states crush terrorism, not the way that we have done, by appeasing terrorists. And the only successful operation of which you're part of, and that is Zarbianism, all of the state approach, Air Force, Navy, Army, SSG commandos, they were utilized, but the same thing is not being done in Balochistan, and we're paying the price. We talk to the Chinese, they say, you keep promising us words. We want action. We're not giving them action. Their citizens are being killed. So my question to both, you spent years on this subject. When are we going to start showing metal? TTP eliminates us, our people, our journals, and we don't take revenge. Why?
Okay. Honestly, it's no-brainer. When I talked about the Jonah, I said you really have to a soft power, but soft power is not soft. I said that people should know if you don't comply, you'll have to pay for it. And when those kind of things happen, there's just no compromise. When people start challenging the writ of the state, they start damaging your people. What to talk of? A life is a life. It's not a question of a colonel or a sepoy or a chowkidar. And one life is gone. Believe you me, these 133 children, if that's the correct number, they changed this country because that was it. So So the decision which pended for a long time was taken quickly, and then the full force came behind. Full force, I said that I'm a military man, but I'm last man to say that we should get into force, but when required, don't hesitate, then push it, and then let it happen. But uske liye, harmony of various institutions is a must. And somebody should take a lead and say, no, this is not acceptable. And we're going through a national action plan, and this will happen. And I think Ehsan Bhai was part of that national action plan, 20 points, starting from really putting the justice in place. What hesitation is there in hanging a guy who's killed 10 of your soldiers? Is there a hesitation? What mercy are we talking about? In that state, there's no killing, there's no hanging by neck. It's my country, I want to handle it that way. So I think even if today we go back to the national action plan, which talks about the judiciary, which talks about the military action, which talks about rebuilding the areas, you already have a document. You just have to follow. For that, you need will. It be political institutions altogether.
I would like to add that just one liner, then over to you, sir. That whether we have to see whether the Chinese example Raza Khan has given, whether that is appreciable or not, whether in terms of human rights and what they have done, whether we can do that similar kind of thing to our own people or not, that is a question we need to keep in mind. Over to you, Sir Ehsan Ghani.
Vigo and the trip to the northern areas, let me tell you, terrorism is a foreign and an internal policy tool. So if you have a tool, you wouldn't want to dismantle that tool. You got my point, Azhar? No? You knew the answer to your question already before you asked it. We don't want to end terrorism in this country. Global powers, regional powers do not want to end at least the low intensity conflict in this region. So that is why the state, as you said, is at its weakest. We talk about the new Bareilly phenomenon, right? TLP phenomenon. I think they're late. I wonder why didn't they start early? Because if you look at the Deobandi terrorism, extremism, they minted millions of dollars through terrorism and extremism, whether it was SSP or LEJ, everyone. And they were left behind. So they decided, why not us? Because they had no nuisance value. Now they have. So pehli baat to wo hai. The second thing is that our policies have been reactive and not proactive. And going back a few years only, Karachi airport happened. Zarbayaz was launched as a reaction and not earlier as a proactive measure. APS was a reaction to Zarbayaz. National Action Plan was a reaction to APS. So we have been always reactive. Why didn't we have a National Action Plan in 1948? We didn't have a National Security Division till 1969, although we became a security state in 1948. So it is kind of in the benefit of the state that we are not finishing them. It's not difficult. The state is the most powerful in a country. When the state decided to end up terrorism of MQM, didn't they do it? Of most of the 20 National Action Plan points, Karachi operation has been the most successful when the state wanted to do it. When the state didn't want to end militias in the country, it didn't. In fact, since the National Action Plan, there are more militias. Point number 5, I think, was armed militias will not be allowed to operate in the country. And one day I asked, who is allowing them that you will not allow them? They're not asking you permissions to operate in this country. National Action Plan was formulated in the same time as the universe came into being, 7 days, right? An actual plan, the 20 points, came about in 12 hours. If you study it, it is an excellent document. It has tactical CT, strategic CT, and hybrid. So there are military actions, there are law enforcement action, and then there are soft interventions. The only benefit of the National Action Plan today is that it is used for political point scoring, for rhetoric. You see, whenever something happens and the opposition has to beat the government, oh, National Action Plan, whenever we have a terrorist attack, there is a set pattern. We condemn it. We say NACTA will be revived. We say National Action Plan will be revived. We say terrorists will not be allowed to operate. And then we give the compensation to those who die. Case closed. It will not happen like this. And we intend to continue on this path till we have extended period of political stability where we have overcome, when we overcome the instability, the financial, then our people will give some attention, the political leaders will give some attention to CT and CVE.
I will request to the panelists to reply in as much brief as possible, so more and more questions can be accommodated over after this.
Congrats to the Ambassador Saab for arranging a very wonderful session, and also to Mr. Abdullah and the team. My question is basically, I'm Shabana Fiaz from Defense Department, Quaid-e-Azam University. Basically, the two things I want to ask is, Ehsan Saab, one is about rehab and de-radicalization. We all know the centers were set up and they have been closed as well at some, and the access by the to the public is very limited. You have to go through ISPR, it's well justified, but for the youngsters and others, it's very, very limited. And my question is that why it's not open and it's not taken into the Punjab, the southern Punjab. There has always been the question of replicating them, but it's never been done. And the role of civil society, although the one of the organization was involved in Sawat and others, it is not replicated in Punjab and others. What is the sensitivity about it? This is to you. And the second to our the speaker from Mr. Habib, you spoke the details say that you are also part of the Jirga, tribal Jirga. I want to ask that what is the layer of connection between the tribal Jirga and the state? And then is it representing or speaking on behalf of the state as a mediator to the TTP? Because I also focus on that subject. So would you like to elaborate that? And also the female role in the FATA areas, because I've been involved with that as the de-radicalization movements there. So is this a part of the jirga from that FATA areas as well? Thank you so much. And the last point about is that you spoke about the intellectual deficit or the jamming. I feel that it is the disowning, or rather the policy makers jamming of mindset, because they don't recognize the indigenous publications that have been made by the Pakistani scholars. And wherever you go, they speak of the, the soft power by this and soft power by that. We don't recognize even the Mehboob ul Haq, who gave the concept of human security back in 90s. Thank you so much.
The Sabaun project is about 3 kilometers from my house. It was originally a TB sanatorium. There were 2 TB sanatoriums in the country, one at Dadar and one at Rangmala. Now the problem was, it was started by Dr. Farooq Khan, who was from my college. Why it didn't work, kind of, that is the question. Our efforts started off well, but rehabilitation and reintegration is not an easy task. Even in countries where it is cited as a success, you would know, it has not been a great success. Even in Indonesia and Malaysia, the only 2 countries, Singapore and Saudi Arabia. Singapore, because of the population size and the problem involved, was very, very minor. And Saudi Arabia, because they could afford to do, as Azhar Khan said, China, so in the same manner, they did it. And they're continuing, they're doing it even now. They're changing the whole narrative of Islam. We can't. We do not have the resources. And why it didn't go to the Punjab was because it wasn't really a success in the KP. Attempts were made in the Punjab also. But that was, I think, sponsored by the police, by the Punjab police. And it is not their job. It is the job of experts who can do that. I saw a video of one of the de-radicalization somewhere in the FATA, former FATA. And I saw these young men marching with white cap, white shalwar kameez, black waistcoat, black chappals, marching and saying Pakistan Zindabad, Pakistan. It doesn't work that way. That is not how you de-radicalize. In fact, if you look at the better models, nothing like this is done. So our efforts have not been proactive. They are not really carried out. But my son wanted to do a research on that back in 2011. And I had to go to the Corps commander to ask him to give him permission and give him some data. So these things should be open. Even our internment centers could be de-radicalization platforms. We're not doing it. The question you asked him was what point?
ये जरगा जो था, ये हमारा रिवायती कबायली जरगा है, लेकिन इसको आप ज़रूर हुकूमती जरगा कह सकते हैं। 20 साल अमेरिका ने लड़ाई की है तालिबान के साथ। 20 साल के बाद वो फिर जरगे के ज़रिए, मुज़ाकरात के ज़रिए आ गए, उन्होंने अपने आप को निकाल लिया, चले गए, वो भी जरगे के ज़रिए। دوسری بات یہ ہے کہ لڑائی افغانستان کا ہے, مسئلہ افغانستان کا ہے, لیکن فاٹا ایک ایسا خطہ ہے, ایک ایسا ایریا ہے کہ بدقسمتی سے پورے پاکستان کو تکلیف ہو رہا ہے, اس میں کوئی شک نہیں ہے. لیکن ایسے ہم قبائلی لوگ جو ہے 9/11 کے بعد ہمارے جو گھر تھے 150 سال پہلے قلعہ نما گھر تھے کہ ہمارے دادا لوگوں نے بنائے تھے, اسی جنگ میں وہ بالکل ملیامٹ ہو چکے ہیں. اس میں ایسے لوگ بھی ہیں کہ بینگا اور اگزئی ہمارے قوم علی خیل ہے, وہاں پہ ایک گھر ایسا ہے کہ 2007 میں ان کے گھر کے 19 لوگ شہید ہو چکے ہیں ایک ہی دن پہ. تو وہ لوگ, سب لوگوں کا یہ سوال ہوتا ہے کہ امریکہ اگر جا کے یہاں پہ مذاکرات کر سکتے ہیں, یہاں سے اپنے آپ کو نکال لیا, تو کیوں نہ ہو کہ کیونکہ قبائلی جو جرگہ ہے یہ جرگہ جو ہے صرف قبائلی علاقوں میں نہیں ہے, پوری دنیا میں ایک سسٹم ہے ایک جرگے کا. لیکن یہ ہے کہ ہمارے قبائلی لوگوں کا ماشاءاللہ ایک رسم و رواج ہے بات چیت کا. تو یہ جرگہ صرف قبائلی وہ نہیں ہے, لیکن یہ ہے کہ حکومت اور ٹی ٹی پی کے درمیان جو مذاکرات ہو رہے ہیں اسی قبائلی جرگے کے تھرو پہ ہو رہے ہیں. یہ ایک پول کا کردار ادا کرتے ہیں اس میں, اور اس میں تقریباً میکسیمم جو بھی ڈیمانڈز تھے وہ الحمدللہ تقریباً ایسا ہے کہ ہو گئے. صرف ایک ہی پوائنٹ پہ ہم کڑے ہیں, کل بھی اس پہ وہ وہاں پہ, کیونکہ ہمارے جرگے کے بعد پھر جید علماء کا ایک ڈیلیگیشن وہاں پہ گیا ہوا ہے, صرف فاٹا مرجر پہ بات وہ کڑا ہے اس پہ. اس میں یہ ہے کہ ہمارا جرگہ جو ہے, ہم جو بھی بات چیت کرتے ہیں تو صرف یہ نہیں ہے کہ ہم حکومت کا جو بات چیت ہے اس کو ہم دیکھتے ہیں, ہم اپنے قبائلی عوام اور 22 کروڑ عوام کو بھی ہم دیکھتے ہیں, کیونکہ اس پہ کافی سارے سیکورٹی فورسز کی وہ بھی اس میں شہید ہو چکے ہیں, اور ہمارے جو قبائلی لوگ ہیں اس میں وہ شہید ہو چکے ہیں, عام پاکستانی شہری بھی اس میں شہید ہو چکے ہیں. یہ جو قبائلی جرگہ ہے یہ صرف نام قبائلی جرگہ ہے, لیکن یہ حکومت کا جرگہ ہے.
Thank you very much. Last two questions, Murtaza and Oma. And I will take both the questions together, and then there will be a quick reply by the panelists, and then we will wind it up.
Assalamu alaikum.
I'm really sorry because we ran out of time. We had to close at 12:30. Sir Suleiman has to travel actually, and yes, over a cup of tea. Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Congratulations, a wonderful event. My question to Mr. Sir Ihsan Ghani sahab. My name is Ghulam Murtaza, Director Peace and Education Foundation, actually working with the religious communities in Pakistan. Sir, when you are in NECTA, so you have initiated so many initiatives we have seen in your era. So in your opinion, what is the religious segment is, is very, very important in context of Pakistan, and you have very nuanced understanding. So my question is, what are the core reasons why government has not been successful in negotiating with the religious community? I totally agree with you, because I understand that within religious community, there is a religious mafia. In other words, we can say religious elite. But still, in Pakistani context, in the larger interest of Pakistan, it is very significant that the government has a good relationship with the religious sector. And as a result, اگر یہ نہیں ہوئے تو ہمیں اب 5 نئے مدرسہ بورڈز بھی نظر آئے ہیں, لیکن وہ اس طرح میں فنکشن کرتے ہوئے نظر نہیں آئے. تو مجھے لگتا ہے کہ یہ ڈسپیرٹی is increasing in that way. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. मेरा नाम तैयबा अब्बासी है. By profession, I'm a lawyer, and out of concern, because I was hearing a very beautiful and very exhaustive conversation. So I have one question. It's a very short question. That why we are still in confusion of good Taliban and bad Taliban? Because since 70 years, we are facing the same dilemma, but we cannot tell the people, we cannot tell the strategic things that this is Taliban is Taliban, terrorism is terrorism, and terrorists are terrorists. Because when in Pakistan, one political party is banned for one slogan that this is the terrorist party, and another day we see that ban has been put out. So when we are negotiating that Taliban, how we can inspire them that terrorism is not acceptable in Pakistan in any form? Because as a lawyer, since I'm working in this profession last 14 years, what I have seen, the definition of terrorism, we cannot explain to our youngsters, we cannot explain to our even strategic partners, we cannot explain to our students even that what is terrorism in our country, because we are still confused that what is basically good Taliban, bad Taliban, because we narrate from that this all thing. So my question is that why we cannot frame the policies, because you were the chief of a very, you can say a good organization, and where you were forming the policies actually. So why we are lacking in a policies making issues that we cannot make policy on this line, that there is no good Taliban or bad Taliban. Thank you so much.
Right, there was a question about communicating with the religious. Right. My experience, it is far easy to have communication and discussion with the religious leaders than it is with the others. And I had discussions with them on Madaris reforms, right? So I told them, okay, we'll have a discussion on this, but we'll not discuss it in my office. So what I did to them was what happens in the Vatican when the new Pope is being elected. I took them to Murray. I closed the doors and I said, we'll get up when we have a consensus document on Madaris reforms. So we sat down in the morning till late one day, and then half day the other. And we came up with a consensus document between ITMP and GOP. अच्छा, अब राष्ट्र साहब ने भी कहा और हम सब चीखते रहते हैं political resolve की. So they went there and took the document to the ITMP headquarters to discuss it with them. I came back and I had discussion on this with all the provincial governments, with all the federal agencies, including intelligence agencies. And in a little while, we came up with a consensus document जो दोनों ने agree किया उसके ऊपर. So I took that document to my minister and I said, you tasked me with this. This is a consensus document between the two of us. He was overjoyed and he said, good job. Now what will we do? We'll call a meeting. And in that meeting, the Prime Minister will be there, the Army Chief will be there, the DGISI will be there, and ITMP will be there, and FPFUJ will be there, and PFMP will be there. I said, excellent. When? I said, very soon. And it kept on delaying until the document was kind of leaked to the media. And then nothing happened. ITMP came back to me and they said, you have ruined us. You signed the document with us and now you're sitting on it. So there was no political resolve to do it. It's easy to talk to them. They understand logic. If you talk to them logically, our problem was on the registration form. So the registration form that was prepared by the Ministry of Religious Affairs, they brought it to the meeting. Hanif Jalandhari was there and Munib and all of them. And they said, this is a document in which you're asking for my mother-in-law's mobile number. Are you going to make dirty calls to her that you want this number? We came up with something that was acceptable to both. So you can talk to them. they have been made this monstrous things, Madaris and the religious leaders, they're not. Coming to, ma'am, your question, the good and the bad. I've added another one to it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And let's not call them Taliban. They're not Taliban. They're militants. They're extremists, they're militants, they're terrorists. Two things I don't like. One, jihadi organizations. And jihadis did this. It's a very, very sad thing to say and do, because jihad in itself is a very, very clean thing to do. And we have made it synonymous, us as well as other countries, synonymous with terror, mischief, mayhem, destruction. So let's not do that. As I said, there are good Taliban who are useful to the state, whether in Afghanistan, whether in Kashmir, whether in the Balkans or Chechnya or wherever. So they're the good Talibans. The bad ones are the ones who attack Pakistani citizen, security apparatus, infrastructure. And the ugly are the nationalists, sub-nationalists इनको कहते हैं. And you're ready to talk to the bad and the good, but you're not ready to talk to the sub-nationalists or the nationalists, although most of their demands are within the Constitution. You should be talking to them. You should not be terming them ugly or labeling them or treating them as ugly. We'll take example of the taboo, PTM. What are their demands? There are resolvable issues and there are irresolvable issues. Between the nationalists, they have grievances, they have identity issues. They want to resolve those. They want you to talk to them and you're not talking to them. And even when you do talk to them, you try to bribe them or their elders or their leaders. So the first one was this. Why are we doing this? Good and the bad and the ugly. And the second was, I think, prescriptions. Definition of terrorism. You were not here when I started my lecture, my talk, I think. Over a cup of, over whatever.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your time. I would now request President IRS, Ambassador Nadeem Riyasa, please conclude the session. Over to you, sir.
It's never easy concluding a session when you've had such an interesting discussion in the panel. But I'll at least try. You see, when the world talks about Pakistan, it mostly talks about terrorism and extremism. These two words, I think, need to have a deeper study, because as far as I know, there is no universally accepted definition of terrorism. It moves. It depends from which side you're looking at terrorism. One man's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter or mujahideen. When you talk about extremism, then you have to talk about violent extremism. You have to talk about intolerance. You have to talk about protecting the culture of a particular country. If you synthesize terrorism, there are many reasons for it. They are ideological, they are economic, poverty, political instability, lack of rule of law, frustration, anger, the desire to take revenge, the desire to correct a wrong which you think has been committed against you or your people. Privilege to the elites, opportunist policies, a weak judicial system. These are the factors which contribute towards the rise of terrorism and extremism. But are these the only ones? Would Pakistan be subjected to terrorism if it was a country which was not in this region? What about our neighborhood? Afghanistan, India, Iran. What about the global interest of powers of the West? So when you talk about terrorism, you need to look at all these factors. We live in a very insecure neighborhood. We lost 70,000 plus people in a war which was not ours. Our economy took a huge hit. But for what? I leave these thoughts with you. Do you think that a group can rise in a country, have the most sophisticated weapons and armaments, which our Air Force and our commandos have to go deep into the mountains to destroy? Did they grow on the land? Or were they imported? Or were they sent? I have been an ambassador for 10 years, and for 10 years I've answered these questions abroad, in universities, in think tanks, that we are a peaceful nation. And we fought for our survival, because nobody will come from outside and help you. You made the sacrifices. You lost your children, you lost your loved ones, and I don't think there is anyone in this country who hasn't lost something. But we rose from that period. We took the Mickey out of the terrorist, as they say. But yet again, it's a phenomena which is coming back. And there are many reasons for it. And they've been spoken about over here. So what should we do? I think as a nation, we should be proud of what we have achieved. We were able to claw back our country from their evil designs, not only of the people who were converted into terrorists, but from the evil designs of the enemies of Pakistan, which are still around our borders and across our borders. I think terrorism can be eliminated. How? Reform programs, proper use of the social media. Today is the era of fake news. We need to overcome that. We need education. We need ideology. Most importantly, we need to preserve our culture. Culture, another word which was used, sir, by you, rivaj. We are proud of our past. We are proud of our rivaj. And please don't think that madrasas are bad. They existed in this part of the world 200 years ago. They were the places of education. But most importantly, we need political stability, we need good governance, we need the rule of law. I worked in the government for 37 years. We have the perfect laws. Our problem is the implementation. We make the laws, we leave them aside. So That, I think, is the most important thing. Policies should be made and they should be long lasting. They should not change with the governments. They are made in the national interest, and the national interest of all political parties should be the same. Democracy has this beauty that you have your own ideas and opinion, but there is no compromise on your national security principles. Right now, we can't be complacent. We have dangers lurking around our borders. We have dangers within, and these need to be overcome. I happen to work in security also, and I personally feel, and I will conclude on this thing, that you need more intelligence-based operations, you need more technology, and the best security is the invisible security. Ladies and gentlemen, we are a resilient nation. We have always overcome adversity, and you, as young people, should be more vigilant on what you do on the social media. Because like I think Ghani Saab said, these days, and Air Chief Marshal also said this thing, that these days wars are over here. They are rarely on the ground. So you can be very much a part of the counter-terrorism strategy.